What if the person you think you are, deep down, deep in your soul, isn't really you? What if that person is a character you've created, a persona you've built up over years of overthinking and defending yourself and everyone else? That's right. You heard the egotistical thought. You know the ones I'm talking about. You're always trying to prove yourself, to win people over, to show them who you are. But what if that's just an act? What if the real you is much more than the sum of your accomplishments, your status, your relationships? What if it's time to let go of all that and return to your true self? A self that doesn't need validation from anyone. A self that is free from the need to control everything. A self that is truly peaceful. It's time to stop acting and start living. Are you ready to learn how? Most people go through life without ever questioning who they think they are. They wake up each day and automatically step into a role. And although the ego isn't evil, it is limiting. It's a set of mental labels, built from childhood experiences, school conditioning, family dynamics, and cultural expectations. And although it gives us a sense of control, it often becomes a cage. You see this in everyday life. A man who can't cry because men don't show weakness. A woman who feels guilty for saying no because she was raised to always please others. Ego identity is reinforced every time someone says, "That's just the way I am." Is it, or is that the way you were trained to be? The truth is, most of our behavior is shaped by emotional survival, not by who we truly are. A child rejected for being loud becomes the quiet adult. A teen mocked for being curious learns to play dumb. These identities become masks, and the longer we wear them, the more we forget they aren't real. One of the ego's favorite illusions is that control equals safety. People spend so much energy trying to manage how they're seen, editing words in conversations, obsessing over social media posts, planning responses to potential criticism. Why? Because the ego believes that if it can control the narrative, it can avoid pain. But that's a trap. The more tightly you grip your image, the more fragile you become. A single opinion, a careless comment, or an unexpected failure can feel like a personal attack. And when your sense of peace depends on external approval, you're never really at peace. Think about how this shows up in real life. A young professional spends hours perfecting a project, not because it brings him joy, but because he's terrified of looking incompetent. A woman avoids taking risks in relationships, fearing her vulnerability might ruin the perfect image she's curated. In both cases, it's not truth guiding them. It's ego clinging to control. This is why burnout, anxiety, and low self-worth are so common. They're symptoms of constantly managing a self-image that doesn't align with the soul. One of the clearest signs you're trapped in ego identity is defensiveness. It shows up when someone disagrees with you, and instead of curiosity, you feel attacked. The ego can't distinguish between criticism of an idea and a threat to identity. So, it fights with sarcasm, with silence, or with withdrawal. You've likely seen this in arguments where someone says, "I can't talk to you right now," not out of calm, but because their identity is under siege. That kind of emotional shutdown isn't peace, it's ego protection. And sadly, many people live in this state without realizing it. Another sign is the constant need to prove something, whether it's intelligence, status, beauty, or success. Ego thrives on comparison. It doesn't matter if you re-winning or losing, as long as you re-competing. You might notice yourself subtly shifting your tone in conversations to sound more important, or downplaying your struggles to appear more in control. These aren't random behaviors. Devere ego tactics, and the cost is real. Connection gets sacrificed for performance, and authenticity disappears beneath the need to be someone. Let's bring this into daily life. Imagine someone makes a joke at your expense, and hours later you're still replaying it in your head, crafting better comeback. Or you avoid talking about a failure because it doesn't fit the image you've built. Or maybe you interrupt people mid-sentence just to make sure your point lands first. These aren't personality flaws, they're ego signals. Each one is a clue that you're retrying to protect a version of yourself rather than live from truth. And the more you notice these patterns, the more you can choose to break them. Also recognize ego identity by how easily you thrown off balance by others' opinions. One compliment can lift your entire day. One criticism can ruin your week. This emotional volatility is a sign that your self-worth is externally sourced. Pi in the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz says, don't take anything personally. That's not a dismissal, it's freedom. When your peace no longer depends on how others see you, you begin to recover your center. Another red flag is resistance to change. Ego thrives on familiarity, even if it's painful. That's why people often stay in cycles that don't serve them. Toxic relationships, unfulfilling jobs, limiting beliefs. Change threatens identity, and the ego hates that. But life is change. Growth is change. And if your identity is too rigid to allow transformation, it's not your ally, it's your jailer. The willingness to evolve is a spiritual act. It means you've stopped defending the ego long enough to hear the soul. You may also catch yourself speaking in absolutes. I am just not good at relationships. I've always been this way. People always let me down. These aren't facts. They're ego narratives. They keep your story predictable and your identity intact, but they also keep you small. When you question these beliefs, you threaten the ego's control. That's why awakening can feel like chaos. The old you begins to unravel, and that's terrifying. But it's also sacred, free. And here's the quiet truth. The moment you start to observe these signs, you've already started waking up. Awareness breaks the spell. Not all at once, but in layers, like peeling off a costume you forgot you were wearing. That costume kept you safe once, but now you're ready for something real. True inner peace doesn't begin with doing more. It begins with noticing more. The first step is learning to observe the ego without judgment. Just like you'd watch a storm pass through the sky, you can begin to watch your reactions, your fears, your emotional surges. This is called awareness. And it's more powerful than any self-help tactic. Because it doesn't fight the ego. It simply shines a light on it. When you can say, there's my need to impress again, or there's that fear of being wrong, you begin to create space between you and your patterns. Plan. And in that space, peace begins. Let's ground this in something real. Imagine being in traffic. Someone cuts you off, and your ego flares up. How dare they? But instead of reacting, you pause. You notice the anger rising, and instead of feeding it, you breathe. That moment of presence is tiny, maybe 2 seconds, but it's sacred. It means the ego didn't win. It means you chose stillness over chaos. These everyday victories, though small, are how peace becomes a practice rather than a theory. Inner peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the ability to stay centered within it. Life will always bring noise, deadlines, disagreements, disappointments. But when your identity isn't tied to the outcome of those things, you respond differently. You move from reactivity to clarity. You stop needing to control every outcome because you trust something deeper is guiding you. Books like Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach dive deep into this, showing how mindfulness dissolves suffering, not by fixing the world, but by softening your resistance to it. A powerful tool for this journey is silence. Not just external silence, but the kind where you sit with yourself. No distractions, no performances, just being. At first, the silence can feel unbearable. The ego will scream, beg for a phone, a task, a scroll. Anything to avoid looking inward. But if you stay, something beautiful happens. Beneath the noise, you meet the part of you that's never changed. A part that doesn't need to be liked, praised, or right. That's the real you, and it's peaceful by nature. Forgiveness also plays a central role in inner peace, but not just forgiving others, forgiving yourself for the years spent trapped in ego, for the lies you believed about your worth, for the times you chose survival over truth. You did what you knew, and now you know more. Forgiveness is not weakness, it's spiritual strength. It's the moment you say, I won't carry this anymore, and in that release, peace rushes in. You'll notice, too, that the more you live from peace, the less the ego speaks. Not because it disappears, but because it's no longer driving the car. It becomes a passenger, loud at times, but no longer in control. Begin making choices not from fear or pride, but from alignment. And that shift, it changes everything. Relationships improve, clarity increases, and your energy expands. It's not magic, it's truth. It's who you were before the world told you who to be. And yeah, even with all this awareness, the ego will still try to return. That's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence. And presence is something you cultivate daily, which brings us to something just as important as awareness, the practice that makes it real. Living beyond the ego isn't about escaping it entirely. It's about developing a relationship with it. One where you no longer confuse its voice with truth. This starts with small, intentional practices. Begin your day in silence, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Before the world wakes up, before your phone pulls you into roles and reactions, sit with yourself. Breathe. Let the mind settle. These quiet moments aren't wasted time. They're where alignment begins. Without this pause, you risk letting the ego take the wheel before your soul even opens its eyes. Next, watch your language throughout the day. The words you speak reflect what you believe about yourself. Phrases like, "I can't," "I always mess up," or "I'm just not that kind of person," are ego affirmations in disguise. Instead, try asking, what would my higher self say right now? This subtle shift doesn't just change conversation. It changes your identity. And when identity shifts, behavior follows. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. Real change begins with who you believe you are. Another daily practice is emotional observation. When something triggers you, a rude comment, a delay, a rejection, pause before reacting. Feel what rises. Where is it in your body? What story is it telling you? The ego usually operates automatically, but awareness interrupts the cycle. For instance, instead of snapping at your partner for forgetting something, you might recognize your fear of being unappreciated. That recognition allows compassion to enter, and compassion is always stronger than ego. Don't underestimate the power of service. When you step out of your own storyline and help someone else genuinely, without seeking recognition, the ego softens. Volunteer for something small. Listen to someone without interrupting. Let someone else take credit. These acts may seem simple, but they rewire your sense of self. They remind you that you are more than your achievements, opinions, or status. And in that humility, you return to peace. Because ego contracts, service expands. Journaling is another practice that pulls you into the now. Not for performance, not to be read later, but as a mirror for your inner life. Ask, what am I trying to control today? Or where did my ego lead me away from peace? Over time, you'll spot patterns. You'll notice which situations tighten your chest and which ones free your breath. That self-awareness accumulated daily becomes a map, a way back to your center, every single time. It also helps to curate your inputs. What you consume becomes what you believe. If you constantly feed the ego with images of perfection, success, and competition, don't be surprised when you feel inadequate. Instead, follow creators and teachers who promote presence, inner truth, and emotional honesty. Podcasts like On Being, or voices like Muji and Byron Katie can become daily anchors. They remind you that you're not alone in this path, and that the path itself is the practice. Above all, be patient. The ego will return, especially in moments of stress or insecurity. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. Each time you pause, breathe, forgive or choose presence. You're rewiring decades of conditioning. Don't rush it. You're not building a new identity. You're returning to the truth that was always there. And now that you've remembered it, stay with me. Because we're not done yet. You weren't born with an ego. You were taught to build one. Piece by piece, you shaped your identity to feel safe, seen, and accepted. But at some point, the mask stopped protecting you and started suffocating you. And now, something deeper is calling. So ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? What would you do if you stopped needing approval? And what kind of peace could you unlock if you stopped believing every story your mind tells? This isn't just about ego. It's about coming home to yourself. If this message opens something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe now and join a growing circle of souls choosing awareness over autopilot, peace over performance. Because the truth, your essence, doesn't need to be built. Be. It only needs to be remembered.